Discover 3 spine-chilling winter horror stories that expose sinister secrets this November night. The wind howled like a wounded beast outside the Bell family's home, as if the very air were alive with malice. November nights in this small Midwestern suburb had always felt cold, but tonight the chill seeped into their bones. Mark Bell was gone, lost to the shadows of uncertainty after being laid off from the factory. The news had twisted the familiar comfort of their family home into an oppressive prison. Alone with her children, Sarah felt the weight of dread settle over her like a thick fog, and the faintest whispers of discontent echoed from the neighbors, peppering the quiet with an unspeakable tension. Inside, Mia and Ethan snuggled together beneath heavy blankets. Their innocent laughter carried little warmth to their mother's heart. The room was cast in the dim light of a single lamp, flickering like the last throbbing heartbeat in a dying person's chest. As giggles turned to hushed tones, the children seemed to sense something was amiss, something lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, muffled voices crept through the thin walls, snaking into their ears like a serpent, words slithering about families who had vanished, swallowed by the very town that once cradled them. Panic coiled in Mia's stomach as she caught a name on the air, her father's employer, tied to this web of eerie disappearances. A sudden crash of thunder sent them both recoiling into silence. Uncertainty filled the room with venom. Sarah's fingers trembled as she searched for candles, her heart pounding like a wild drum. Right then, darkness swallowed their home. The power had gone out. Everything felt wrong. Mia gripped her brother's hand tight, their breaths rapid, each inhale laced with dread. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As Sarah lit the candles, their glow flickered against the shadows, adding to the suffocating sense of dread. Mia's heart raced. The haunting whispers outside seemed to grow louder, clawing at the edges of her sanity. The kids crept toward their father's study, drawn to the mess of papers and history that seemed desperate to share its secrets. Dust motes danced through the air, spotlighted by the candlelight, creating a surreal ambiance. What they discovered sent icy fingers coursing through their veins. A newspaper article from decades past, detailing strange disappearances linked to a cult known to have hidden in their town. Shivers cascaded down their spines. Who were these people masquerading as neighbors? Were they still among them? A deafening scrape echoed from outside, sending a shudder through Mia. Peering through a frosted window, her breath caught in her throat. Shadowy figures gathered on the far edge of their yard, whispering secrets that felt like razor blades slicing through the chilling night air. Her heart raced, visions of the stories they'd overheard igniting fears deep within. With the evening growing darker, every creak haunted them, and the walls felt like they were closing in, smothering them in a suffocating embrace. In that moment, a chilling knock rang out, vibrating through the house, an invitation from the darkness stretching its icy fingers towards them. The familiar sanctuary of home now felt like a looming trap, and a singular, terrifying question burned in the air. Could they escape the shadows that had drawn too close? The knock echoed again, this time more insistent, a rhythmic thud that seemed to mock their fear. Sarah's heart raced, each beat an urgent whisper that called her to act. "Stay here," she commanded Mia and Ethan, her voice trembling. The children huddled together, eyes wide with terror as their mother approached the door, candle in hand. Shadows flickered around her, dancing in the golden light, taunting her. The moment of hesitation felt endless, a thick slice of time where darkness shimmered with unseen threats. With a final breath, Sarah reached for the doorknob, her fingers shaking. A burst of cold air rushed in as the door cracked open, and she squinted into the dim light of the porch. Nothing but empty night. "Hello?" she called out, voice barely above a whisper. An icy wind curled around her legs, wrapping her in an embrace that felt deadly. She peered into the abyss beyond, sensing an emptiness that twisted her stomach. Her instinct screamed at her to close the door, but curiosity tugged stronger. Just then, a heartbeat echoed behind her, sharp and urgent, causing her to jump. She whipped around to find Mia's face pale, her wide eyes betraying the horror Sarah felt but tried to mask. "Mama, someone's out there." Ethan's small voice trembled, the conviction in his words turning her skin to ice. Sarah turned back to the shadowy expanse, heart hammering. Then she heard it, the breathy hiss of whispers, darting like fireflies in the night. Panic surged, flooding her veins with adrenaline. Who lurked in their yard? Were they the same figures Mia had seen? It felt like the town's dark past was breathing through the walls, poised to swallow them whole.
Just as she was about to pull the door closed, a figure emerged from the mist, tall, cloaked in shadows, face obscured. A friend? A foe? In that instant, her mind raced back to the chilling newspaper article, recalling the phrase, "lost to the night." She couldn't let this figure enter. "Go back! You don't belong here!" Sarah shouted, voice cracking.
The shadow paused, seemingly intrigued, the whispers around it dying down. Silence fell like a heavy blanket, wrapping around their home. Then, without a word, the figure pointed into the darkness behind them. "Mom, is it a neighbor?" Mia whispered, dipping into her brother's embrace, her tiny body trembling. "I don't know," Sarah breathed, shifting uncomfortably. The figure stepped forward, closer to the light, and she caught a glimpse of something metallic glinting in its hand. Her stomach churned. In a flurry, Sarah slammed the door, locking it tight. Breathless, she spun to face Mia and Ethan, a wild look in her eyes. But just then, the power flickered back on, brightening the room. Sarah's sanity danced on the edge of that newfound light. The moment offered little comfort when a sequence of frantic knocks rapped against the door, punctuated by the emergence of a voice, low and unyielding. "Let us in, Sarah. It's safe now. You must come outside with us." Her heart sank. The voice was familiar, fragmented by deceit and whispering pull. Mark. "Mama, come on," Ethan cried, tugging at her sleeve, eyes fearful as he clung to his sister. But what if it was a trap, a mask hiding something far worse? "Stay quiet. Don't say a word," Sarah hushed, mind racing. The shadows outside seemed to pulse, alive with anticipation. Whatever had drawn her husband away now sought to erase their very existence. Then the whispers erupted into a chorus, surrounding their home, clawing through the windows, deep and guttural. Every hair on Sarah's body stood on end. They called for Mark. They were inviting him, or her, to join the darkness. Time felt frozen, dread cascading like a heavy snowfall, when she finally whispered to the kids, "We need to run." But where would they go, when even the walls were in on the hunt? As they contemplated their next move, another knock shattered their fragile silence, deeper now, as if something more sinister was pressing in, more than just the winter chill. The question loomed dreadfully. Could they trust anyone in this nightmare? And as the walls closed in, a thought chilled Sarah to the core. They might already be too late. The air thickened as Sarah turned towards Mia and Ethan, her heart racing. The sounds outside felt like a living thing, crawling across the porch and settling into the walls of their home. She could sense the darkness pressing in, each knock a pound of dread reverberating through her bones. "We need to find a way out," she urged, glancing at the windows, shrouded in swirling shadows. Mia clutched Ethan closer, eyes brimming with tears. "Mom, what if it's really Dad?" "There's no telling who's out there," Sarah spat, her voice sharp, desperate. A chill crept beneath her skin as the whispers once more unfurled, sinister and insistent. "We can't let them in." She felt the weight of her responsibility press down, an anchor tethering her to this moment of terror. The knocking intensified, a chaotic rhythm that seemed to echo the frenetic pounding of her heart. "What do we do? What do we do?" Ethan whimpered, practically shaking with fear. "Shh," Sarah shushed, raising her finger to her lips in a futile attempt to stifle the rising panic. They had to be quiet, and yet the din outside demanded attention, each call for mercy filled with a malicious sweetness that tasted like poison on her tongue. As Sarah backed away from the door, she noticed a shadow dance across the frosted window, a figure crouched against the glass, its features indistinguishable but distinct in their menace. It beckoned her with a slow, deliberate hand. Fear clawed at her throat, a chilling realization washing over her. They weren't alone, and whoever or whatever was out there wanted them. "Mama, did you see that?" Mia cried, her voice a high-pitched squeal cutting through the night. Panic rumbled in Sarah's chest as she turned to face her children, eyes wide with terror. She caught a glimpse of Mia's drawings scattered on the floor, figures in cloaks, eyes glistening like black pearls. It couldn't just be a coincidence. "Get away from the windows!" Sarah shouted, her voice finally rising above the chaos. The children obeyed, retreating to the corner of the room like frightened mice. The shadows shifted outside, a mass of pulsating darkness pressing against the light. Suddenly, the cacophony ceased. A silence, heavy and pregnant, enveloped them. Mark's voice echoed again, but this time it was joined by another, a woman's, soft and luring. "Come join us, Sarah. You mustn't stay in the light.
It's better in the dark. What is happening? Sarah breathed, her mind racing. She slammed her eyes shut, fighting the impulse to listen. Stay close to me, she whispered fiercely, holding her children's hands tightly, trembling fingers interlocking. But the darkness sang on, the whispers inching closer, purring with promises of comfort and safety. They probed at the edges of her reality, suffocating her mind with visions of a familiar landscape twisted into nightmares. Dead trees, broken roads, the tang of despair filling the spaces once occupied by warmth and laughter. Another knock, this time softer, nearly a whisper itself, danced across the door. "Let us in," Mark pleaded, the words laced with desperation. "Please, Sarah." "Mama," Ethan whined, the sheer fear in his eyes pulling at her heart. She could see them all now, figures beyond the door, engulfed in the night, waiting with bated breath, faces half-formed in the shadows. Just when Sarah felt the walls closing in, the power blinked again, flashes of light strobing in and out. Her breath hitched. Each flicker seemed to bring forth glimpses of something horrific, garnered hands reaching, twisted faces contorted in silent screams. "The basement," Sarah shouted. "We can hide. It's below."
She grabbed their hands, yanking them away from the door, heart pounding louder than the drumming on the wood. As they fled down the narrow staircase, dread coiled tightly in her gut. Each step deeper into the shadows felt like plunging into a maw. The door rattled violently overhead, followed by deafening thuds as if something monstrous wanted in. And in the sudden, enveloping darkness of the basement, they froze, clinging to each other. What had they just escaped? A moment passed, then another, and all Sarah heard was the muted pounding overhead, the hushed whispers of dread echoing through the very air around them. Then came an unsettling silence, scarier than the noise itself. "Mama?" Mia whispered, terror lacing her voice, breaking the stillness. "What if they find us?" Outside, the shadows stirred again, but this time they brought with them the soft sound of laughter, childish, innocent, echoing a familiar tune that chilled Sarah to her bones. What if it wasn't just Mark outside? What if something far worse was waiting? Muffled laughter echoed through the oppressive darkness, wrapping around Sarah like a constricting serpent. The childish giggles were jarring against the heaviness of silence in the basement. It didn't belong here. It felt wrong, twisted, mocking. "Mama," Ethan whimpered, and the sound gutted Sarah. She held him tighter, glancing around the dim space. The basement was full of old boxes, piles of junk, and shadows that shifted as if alive. She felt a chill creeping down her spine. "They're playing games with us." Sarah's voice shook as she strained to hear outside, each creak of wood above causing her heart to race. What kind of game was this? And who were these entities that had stolen her husband's voice? "Crouch down," she urged, pulling Mia and Ethan lower. They balled themselves into a corner, fear vivid in their eyes. The laughter continued, unending and eerily cheerful. Was it an invitation or a threat? A sudden crash from above made her jump. The pounding resumed, frantic and desperate now. "Sarah, please," Mark's voice cracked through. "Let me in. You have to trust me." "Don't listen," Sarah hissed, feeling her breath quicken. Was it really Mark? Could he be safe? Each moment was drenched in uncertainty, the whispers swirling around them. "We can't trust what we hear," she reminded herself as much as her children. "Why isn't he just coming in?" Mia pleaded, wide-eyed. "Why is he out there?" The laughter surged, weaving a cruel melody that blended with the sharp, insistent knocks. An uncanny sense filled Sarah, an awareness that this entity outside, this version of Mark, was not the man she loved. It felt corrupted, tainted with something she didn't want to name. "I want to go home," Ethan whispered, his small voice laced with tears. Squeezing their hands tighter, her lifeline, Sarah felt a searing wave of protectiveness. "We'll get out of this," she vowed, though her heart trembled. "We just need to wait." But as the whispers grew louder, she couldn't contain the growing urge to flee. She smoothed her hands over their heads, absorbing their fragile warmth. "Listen, if we stay quiet, they might not find us." She strained to quiet her own heart racing in her chest. Suddenly, the laughter turned to something grotesque, mingling with sobs and cries. "Sarah, we miss you," echoed through the wood above. How could they miss her? She didn't recognize the voices, but could feel the reality shifting, warping around her. Then came a voice that sent ice coursing through her veins, low, guttural, and familiar. Come join us in the dark where you belong. She flinched, heart racing. Instinctively, she pulled Mia and Ethan closer, shielding them with her body as she fought the rising nausea. This wasn't over. She could feel it in her bones. But the atmosphere thickened, a palpable dread pressing down on them. It was suffocating, the very essence of despair and fear binding her thoughts. How long could they stay hidden? The lap of shadows above morphed into figures. She caught fleeting glimpses, dark shapes shuffling, hovering with intent. Breath hitching, Sarah could only imagine the horrors lurking above. Suddenly, silence crashed down upon them, thick and almost deafening. The laughter ceased, but it was replaced by a new sound, a steady tapping from the far corner of the basement, one they'd managed to overlook before. A trapdoor. As the world above settled into ominous stillness, anticipation and dread collided. "What if?" Mia whispered, stifled hope glimmering in her tone. "What if it leads outside?" Before Sarah could answer, a low growl reverberated from the shadows as something stirred. What lay beyond the trapdoor? What would they have to face next? The growl resonated through the darkness, rich with malice. It sent a jolt of fear straight to Sarah's heart. Her instincts screamed to flee, yet she found herself frozen, eyes darting toward the trapdoor, the only hint of escape from the horror pressing in upon them. "Mama." Ethan's voice trembled at her side, a whisper lost in the oppressive blackness. "Stay quiet," she urged, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We have to be very, very quiet." But even as she said it, she could feel a gnawing doubt creep into her mind. Could they really hide long enough? The tapping continued rhythmically, a horrifying countdown. She crouched lower, feeling the cold, hard floor beneath her palms. Glancing again toward the trapdoor, she caught the briefest flicker of movement. Shadowy tendrils swayed. Something was trying to come through. "Mia, stay close," Sarah hissed, readying herself to bolt at the first sign of danger, her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the trapdoor. A muffled thump sounded above, and the calm that followed felt unnatural. It was as if whatever wild cacophony had inhabited the space had temporarily dissipated, leaving behind an uncomfortable stillness that heaped on their dread.
The low growl returned, more distinct now, accompanied by scratching, claws against wood, a mark of something alive and unhindered. Box shadows stretched across the basement floor like skeletal fingers. As a whispering wind danced through the cracks, Sarah felt as if the air itself had become charged with malevolence. "Mama, I'm scared," Ethan whimpered again. "Shh," she urged again, trembling not just from the cold, but an inner quake that threatened to break her. They were cornered, exposed. Mia swallowed hard. "I want to see what's in there." Her courageous curiosity stung Sarah's heart with dread. "Please, no, we have to wait," she pleaded. She had to think. They couldn't afford mistakes, not now. But if staying meant facing that growl, she had to consider every option. With each passing second, the tapping morphed into something almost rhythmic, a mocking cadence that echoed through the basement. It heightened her sense of terror, dragging her thoughts into a spiral of what could be waiting for them. Just one look behind the trapdoor could change everything. Suddenly, a harsh scrape pierced the silence. It came from the trapdoor. She leaned forward, teeth clenched as she strained to see through the dark. What if it was something worse, something they couldn't fight off? This could be the end. But then the latch shifted, a small, cautious sound muffled behind the heavy wood. She could hardly breathe, and yet she felt a jolt of adrenaline. The steady rhythm from above shifted as a creak resounded, one that promised a new, horrifying revelation. "Ethan," Sarah whispered urgently, "if it opens, we run." Before she could finish, the trapdoor groaned, and with one swift motion it swung open. Light poured into the basement, slicing through the darkness, but with it came a cold gust that wreaked havoc on the warmth they clung to. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, only partially visible. Its presence towered, flickering between reality and nightmare. The outline was disturbingly familiar, yet marred by shadow and twisted features. "Sarah," it hissed, the voice coming out low and tainted. "It's time to come home." The room spun as Sarah's heart plummeted. "Mama, who is that?"
Mia cried, clutching Ethan tightly. In that moment, all sense of reality twisted, and the horror of what lay ahead gripped Sarah as she grappled with the incomprehensible truth standing before her. What had been unleashed? What price would they have to pay for survival? The figure loomed larger, its jagged silhouette painting an unsettling picture against the dim light from above. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat, a mix of disbelief and dread washing over her. It moved closer, gliding rather than stepping, a serpent's grace that sent her instincts screaming for flight. "Mama!" Ethan wavered, his small frame pressed against Mia, who had instinctively wrapped her arms around him.
The room was thick with fear, weighty and palpable, as if they were underwater, struggling to resurface. "Run!" she managed to gasp, but her command came too late. The figure stepped forward, the light revealing a face that was a grotesque parody of her own, twisted features flickering in and out of her memory. Was it a phantom of her past? A monstrous reflection that had escaped into the night? "Don't you remember?" it crooned, voice like gravel scraping against glass. "You chose to leave, but I never would." "Get back!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline seeping into her limbs, pushing her to take the lead. She couldn't allow this thing, this cruel reminder of decisions she couldn't remember, to get any closer. The moment she moved, the presence shot forward, a shadow flung by the collapse of light. It surged toward them faster than she could blink, and instinctually she yanked Mia and Ethan back, guiding them toward the creaking steps that led to their only hope. The basement door rattled in its frame, a cruel reminder of what lay behind them. Choices, regrets, unleashing a terror she could feel scraping at her mind's edges. "Stop!" Mia cried out, her voice breaking through amid the chaos. "If it's you, what do you want?" Silence hung as if the very air was waiting for an answer. Sarah's heart raced painfully against her ribs. This had to end. "Completion," the figure hissed, and the word rang out, harsh and menacing. "The life that you chose holds a debt. Come home or forfeit what you love." Fear clamped around Sarah's throat like a vice. Home? There was no home left. It had abandoned them, a barren shell of memories long eclipsed by this nightmare. She felt the walls closing in, her mind racing. "What do you mean? What debt?" "Your children," eyes like black pits bored into her soul. "You cannot keep them." Before she could respond, claws racked across the floor, another presence stirring, creeping closer. The growl from before had returned, echoing from shadows that danced along the corners of the basement walls. The temperature plummeted around them, breath fogging into clouds. "Get going!" Sarah screamed, dragging the children toward the steps. Panic fueled her as she propelled them upward, adrenaline thrumming through her veins. The world narrowed to the rhythmic thuds of their hearts and the scratching that grew louder behind them. A force surged against her back, a presence so thick it felt tangible, like a fist pushing her to turn and face it. With one last glance, she saw the figure, the twisted version of herself, stretching its arms, melding into the darkness while the growling intensified. "Run!" she shouted again as they burst through the door and into the night, the chill wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. But even outside, the shadows followed. The air crackled with a sinister energy, her resolve fraying as the whispers taunted from afar.
They erupted into the moonlit clearing, breathless and terrified, searching for safety in the night. But could they ever escape the clutches of those they had abandoned? The woods loomed ominously ahead. Was it refuge or the predator's lair? In the trembling silence, a truth crashed in on Sarah. They were not free. Something was still hunting them, lurking within the trees, waiting for the chance to catch up. "What do we do now, Mama?" Ethan's tiny voice pulled her from the spiral of fear. And in that chilling moment, she realized escape was only the beginning. The hunt had only just begun. What would they have to confront next? The whispers danced through the trees like a grotesque lullaby. Sarah could feel them curling around her thoughts, yanking her into visions of horrors she dared not acknowledge. She gripped Mia's hand tighter, guiding her and Ethan into the darkness that loomed ahead. "Keep close," she urged, her voice low, trembling. She wished she had a plan, a map to guide them toward safety, but with every step deeper into the woods, uncertainty gnawed at her, feasting on her hope. The branches creaked ominously overhead, casting twisted shadows that stretched towards the ground like skeletal fingers.
They were not alone. The weight of unseen eyes pressed down on her, and every rustle, every snap of twigs was a reminder that something tracked their every move. "Do you hear that?" Mia whispered, her voice barely a wisp above the wind. Sarah nodded, but she didn't want to acknowledge the low growl echoing from somewhere behind them. It was deep and hungry, an insatiable sound that stirred the already raw edges of her fear. Just ahead, the darkness parted slightly, revealing what looked like a clearing. An ancient stump jutted out like a throne of decay, surrounded by twisted roots that seemed to grip the earth as if trying to escape their doom. "There," she pointed, desperation kicking her into a moment of clarity. "We can rest there, maybe find some way to—" A guttural snarl erupted from behind, cutting through the night like a razor. Panic surged through Sarah, her heart pounding in her ears. She pushed the children ahead, urgency fueling her every move. As they reached the clearing, the air grew thick and oppressive. Shadows seemed to pulse and morph, warping into grotesque shapes that danced just beyond her vision. A spark of light flickered, momentarily illuminating a tattoo of words carved into the stump. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." "What does that mean, Mama?" Ethan's innocent question hung in the air, a dissonance that jarred against the chilling promise of the inscription. She knelt beside the stump, fingers tracing the letters. The words seemed alive, whispering promises of despair. Tension coiled in her chest. It's just old writing," she lied, forcing a smile that felt foreign on her face. But her body betrayed her. The air grew colder, the shadows closer. A sudden rustle pierced the thick silence. "Go!"
She shoved Mia and Ethan behind the stump, her instincts flaring. "Stay hidden!" Gritting her teeth, Sarah turned to face the burgeoning darkness. The growling swelled, now a chorus of voices wrapped in malice. Her breath quaked in her throat as she scanned the tree line, desperation coursing through her veins. From the shadows, the figure stepped forward again. This time, it was not alone. A pack, silhouettes emerging like spirits from a nightmare, encircled her. They moved like smoke, their features indistinct yet unmistakably menacing. "They've found you," the twisted copy of herself hissed. Its voice was a melody of mockery, festering memories echoing her secrets. "Completion is near. You can't run from what you've left behind." Terror twisted violently in her gut as Sarah clenched her fists, determination igniting the faintest flicker of hope. "Stay back!" she shouted, but the words felt weak against the wave of dread swelling around her. With a sudden burst, the shadows lunged forward. Heart racing, Sarah leaped, grabbing Mia and Ethan, pulling them close. They bolted into the underbrush, the dark figures surging after them, the growls morphing into a hungry howl that reverberated through the trees. "We have to find a way out," she shouted, urgency thick in her voice. But the claws of despair clutched at her, as if the very ground sought to consume them. Their breaths came quicker as they sprinted. Branches snapped underfoot, the growls were closer, closer than ever. In the distance, a faint glimmer caught her eye. A path, faintly illuminated, beckoned them forth. "Over there!" she yelled, pointing toward the light. They dashed toward it, hearts pounding, hope flickering. Just as they approached, a shadow leapt from the darkness, cutting them off. "No!" Sarah screamed, her body instinctively shielding Ethan and Mia. But she felt it, the harsh breath of the monster, the weight of inevitability closing in around them. And then, suddenly, there was silence. The night held its breath, and she dared to hope there might still be an escape. But when she turned to the kids, her heart sank. "We need to keep moving," she whispered, dread creeping back into her chest. Little did she know, the truth that waited in the coming dark was far more horrifying than the monsters chasing them. What waited beyond the trees? Could it be salvation, or the end? A shiver crawled up Sarah's spine as stillness enveloped them. She glanced around, searching the darkness for the shadow that had intercepted their path. It felt as if the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next desperate move. The air grew thick, too thick for comfort, and fear surged anew. "Stay behind me," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the oppressive quiet. Ethan's small hand trembled in hers, but Mia remained frozen, wide-eyed and fearful, confusion swirling in her gaze as the shadows danced around them. From the corner of her eye, Sarah noticed something glimmering, a small silver object half buried in the dirt. She bent down, brushing away the leaves and debris, and uncovered a locket.
It swung open with a quiet click. Inside, two familiar faces smiled back at her. Her heart crashed against her ribcage. They were images of her parents, taken long before she had lost them to ruin and regret. "Mom?" Ethan's voice broke through the thick air. "What's wrong?" This is nothing," she stammered, snapping the locket shut. But it felt like more than nothing. It was a taunt, a reminder. The shadows shifted closer, whispering through the branches. How could they know? "Let's go," she urged, stuffing the locket into her pocket. They surged forward again, but every step felt like an incitement of despair. Was each rustling leaf a whisper of malice? Did the cold air carry a warning? Then, the ground crumbled beneath their feet. Sarah stumbled as they plunged into what felt like a pit of darkness, landing hard on a cold earthen floor. Panic surged, and she shielded the children as they tried to adjust to the sudden change. The walls of this cramped space were rough against her skin, as if the earth itself was alive with anxiety. "Is everyone okay?" she asked, breathless. Both kids nodded, though fear painted their faces. A low growl reverberated from the far corner of the darkness. The sound animated every bit of horror she had been holding back. The last 8 years of her life had taught her terror in ways she hadn't fathomed, but this suffocating claustrophobia was different. It felt intimate, as if the darkness had learned her secrets. "Shh," she instructed, pressing a finger to her lips. They huddled close, losing themselves in the shadows, just waiting. Suddenly, a light flickered like a lighthouse in the storm, illuminating the space in eerie brightness. It revealed grotesque etchings carved into the walls, faces frozen in terror, mouths stretched in silent screams. The kids gasped, and Sarah's stomach churned. "What if," Ethan ventured, "what if this is the end?" "No," she countered fiercely, though her heart trembled. "There must be a way out. We have to stay together." But the whispering began again, echoing around them, laced with mocking laughter. "Stay together," the voices echoed. "You can't escape what you've become." The locket burned against her chest, its weight a reminder of every choice she made, a swing of fate. Footfalls ricocheted through the air with each heartbeat, and shadows began to shift. Sarah's instincts flared. "This way," she shouted, determination bubbling to the surface. She turned her back on the growling sound, pulling the children. A sliver of light beckoned from a small opening in the far corner. A way out? They rushed forward, but the sounds intensified, twisting into a chaotic mix of snarls and cries. The darkness pressed in close, thick and suffocating. As they dove toward the light, corporeal forms surged forward with piercing eyes, threatening to cut them off. One hand reached out, almost touching Mia's shoulder. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice breaking as desperation fueled her every ounce of strength. They barreled through the opening, but they didn't know what awaited them on the other side. When Sarah emerged into the cold night air, she skidded to a halt, and the air rushed back into her lungs. But they were not in the woods anymore. They stood on a fog-laden street, lined with abandoned houses, shadows creeping along cracked windows like fingers looking for something lost. "What is this place?" Mia whispered, staring around wide-eyed. A soft breeze picked up, hinting at a storm rolling in, as the whispers resumed, cold and mocking. What had they awakened? As Sarah turned back, the path they had come from faded into murmuring shadows, and the street ahead twisted into a maze of despair and horror. What they didn't know was that the darkness was not behind them. It had followed, lurking ever closer, waiting for the moment of reckoning. Could they survive the night? Each heartbeat echoed in the silence, a countdown to something dark unraveling. And just above the cry of the wind, she could almost make out the whispers saying, "You've nowhere left to run."
Mia shuddered, her eyes wide with palpable fear. "It's probably just a clock," Sarah offered weakly, not believing her own words. They arrived at the cracked door of an old chapel. The wood was warped, groaning under the weight of their presence, but their breath hung in the air, warm against the strange chill. The light flickered inside like an invitation. Steeling herself, Sarah pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing like a scream in the night. The interior was surprisingly ornate, adorned with faded stained glass and dusty pews, but the colors twisted grotesquely in the dim light, unsettling holy images twisting into distorted visions of despair. "Stay close," she commanded, scanning the room, her heart racing. Ethan moved behind her. Mia stayed so close that her breath mingled with Sarah's. A heavy silence cocooned them, broken only by the soft yet pervasive whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls. "Why are they whispering?" Ethan asked, his voice rising in pitch. "They want us to leave. Earworms, they get in your head," Sarah managed, her thoughts racing, but part of her wondered if it was too late. An altar loomed at the front, draped in dark cloth. The once bright candles flickered like dying stars. An ornate box rested atop it, something from a nightmare. Sarah's got twisted as she felt drawn to it, the shadows curling around her feet, pulling her closer. Shadows danced along the walls, eagerly awaiting her touch. "Open it," whispered the darkness, voices intertwining like claws. "No, we should go," Ethan pleaded, panic erupting. But curiosity tugged at Sarah's heart, weaving a web of intrigue that felt impossible to resist. A flicker of movement caught her eye from the box, and for an instant she saw a glimmer, a reflection perhaps? Something beckoned, promising answers. But a low growl began to ripple through the chapel, growing louder. The shadows thickened, shifting and seething. "We need to leave now," Sarah urged, pulling the children back. They stumbled as the growl morphed into a roar, and the very air around them thickened, nearly squeezing the breath from their lungs. But as they turned to flee, the bell tolled again, louder this time, and the room began to spin. The shadows pressed closer, almost jubilant in their looming hunger. And then the box exploded open, a flash of light bursting forth. Sarah gasped, shielding the kids as spectral figures leapt from it, luminous but twisted, their anguished faces haunting her very soul. "What have we awakened?" Sarah found herself whispering, horror freezing her insides. From behind them, a dark presence loomed, its breath foul with a blend of decay and malice. The whispers surged, mingling with the growls in a crescendo of madness as the shadows converged into a singular darkness. As the air thickened and a palpable dread overtook her, Sarah realized they might not leave this place at all. "Run!"
She yelled, the urgency sweeping through her like icy water. But as they dashed toward the door, a chilling presence gripped her heart. The shadows were not merely monsters, they were memories, weights from the past, crashing down as they pulled toward the chapel's edge. "As far as you flee," the whispers taunted, "you cannot outrun fate." And just as they reached the door, a scream erupted from Ethan. Something cold coiled around his foot, yanking him back. Sarah's heart raced. What would it take to save her children? A mad dance with darkness had begun, and she knew they were only scratching the surface of a far more profound terror. "Mom, help!" Ethan cried, eyes wide with raw fear. The door slammed shut with a thunderous clap as reality twisted around them. What held them captive within the fog of shadows? What awaited in the dark silence? As the door slammed shut, a heavy silence fell over the chapel, the air thick with tension. Panic clawed at Sarah's heart as Ethan's voice echoed in her mind. He was trapped. "Hold on," she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. She turned back, her breath hitching as she rushed toward her son. The shadows grasped at her ankles, clawing and tugging like the past, demanding accountability. The spectral figures loomed around her, their eyes hollow but filled with a longing that chilled her further, calling for something from her she had no intention of giving. "Ethan!" She reached out, stretching her arms toward him as he struggled against the shadowy tendril that snaked around his foot. She could feel her own worries swelling up inside her, memories of loss flooding back. She couldn't let those ghosts take her child. In a sudden burst of determination, Sarah lunged forward, grasping Ethan's arm just as he was yanked backwards. With a primal scream that tore from her throat, she yanked him toward her, feeling the biting cold of the dark pull against him. "You can't have him!" she screamed into the suffocating silence that enveloped them. The dark mass hesitated, as if her refusal resonated with a long-forgotten memory. Ethan fell into her arms, his wide eyes shimmering with fear. "What's happening, Mama?" he whimpered, shaking uncontrollably. "Whatever you do, don't let go of me," she replied, pulling him close to her chest. She could see the twisted figures watching, murmuring to one another, their intentions cloaked in fear and malice. It spurred her to action.
Mia, Sarah shouted, turning to her daughter, who stood frozen before the altar, the dark box beckoning like a siren. Mia, come here, now! Mia's gaze flicked between her mother and the figures, conflict etched across her young face. In that fleeting moment, Sarah saw how deeply the shadows had woven themselves around them, how the stories of despair had taken root. You're safe with me, Sarah cried again, her voice now shaking with desperation. Mia's break from the trance was like a rush of desperate clarity.
She ran to them, and they formed a little huddle, clinging tight to one another as the room twisted with shifting shadows. Then Sarah felt them all closing in, darkness shifting towards them, hungry for souls. "We need to get out," she yelled, turning toward the solid, heavy door, the only means of escape. But it held considerable weight from within, as if it had grown roots deep into the ground. "Mom, push!" Mia urged, the strength of her innocence illuminating the dark. Driven by her children's faith, Sarah slammed her shoulder against the door until it groaned in response. The shadows wailed, sounds of anguish and rage mingled with the echoes of their own cries, but she pressed on, fueled by the visceral instinct to protect. "Together!" she yelled, rallying them. "On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. They barreled against the door with all their weight, and its heavy wood finally gave way, splintering open to the cold night outside. They stumbled forward as the shadowy forms recoiled momentarily, caught off guard as they tumbled into the air. "Run toward the light," Sarah urged, glancing back only long enough to witness the shadows swirling behind them, congealing into a morbid mass determined to overtake them. Each stomp against the pavement sent tremors through her soul as they bolted down the fog-laden street, breathless with adrenaline. The chill in the air wrapped around them, but the thrum of the darkness fell further behind, swallowed by the resilience of their unity. Their feet pounded against the cracked path, a rhythm of survival that settled in with every desperate breath. "What are they?" Mia panted, her little heart banging against her ribs. "Just shadows of the past," Sarah shouted back, casting a swift glance over her shoulder. "They can't hurt us if we don't let them." Ethan kept pace, his small hand clinging to Sarah as they rushed past old homes, slowly vanishing into the night, each with an eerie tale waiting to be told. Then, as they turned a corner, they spotted it, the flicker of streetlights illuminating a park ahead. "There!" Sarah gasped, hope flaring. They sprinted forward, crossing the threshold into a sanctuary of pale light, where the trees loomed above them in silence. As they finally stumbled into the clearing, Sarah felt a wave of liberation wash over her. The throbbing whispers faded, if only for a moment. She collapsed to her knees, panting heavily, pulling the children into an embrace with her. "What just happened, Mama?" Ethan whispered as he clung to her, his small body trembling. "Just a nightmare," Sarah replied, swallowing the lump in her throat. They were safe for now, and it felt as if the tiny spark of their family had ignited a protective shield. And for the first time, she let herself believe, beyond the shadows, beyond the whispered fears, there was hope. Yet, even in the sanctuary of light, shadows crept around the edges, a reminder that darkness never truly dissipates. They would always linger. "Let's stick together," Sarah said, her voice steadier now as she looked into her children's eyes, their innocence grounding her. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. We will find a way home." As they held tightly together under the faint glow of the streetlight, their unity became a shield, the promise that even in the gripping grasp of darkness, love would guide them. But somewhere, in the shadows, the promise remained unfulfilled, waiting patiently for the moment they would once again falter. The night was far from over. If you've made it this far, it's your turn to take action. You need to subscribe now to catch exclusive upcoming stories just like this one. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and keep the thrill alive. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories. I want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything.